I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see.
It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I am your host, Etienne de Bruin. CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products, building incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Welcome to the CTO podcast. Eric, what should we name this podcast?
Oh boy, you're putting me on the spot.
Currently, I'm sure by the time this is published, there'll be some crazy jingle and some awesome flashing letters.
You've got that creative spirit, man.
So we're flirting with a couple names right now. So Eric and I we decided that the name shall reveal itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Just like in the block of clay, the sculptor, the sculpture is in there. You just have to.
It's like a mentor of ours says, it's only in the doing that you know what next to do. So your last name is Weiss.
I pronounce it Weiss, but yes.
And it's German.
It is.
And in Germany, so it's two S's, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Germany, they have that Eszett for the two S's.
Right.
So were you ever tempted to do WEI and then?
No.
Never tempted.
No.
Okay.
I'm not actually German, so it's.
I was just wondering if you were.
It's our what is it? It's our immigrant name from Ellis Island. It was a chosen name.
A chosen name.
Yeah.
Oh, so you literally are not actually German.
No, I'm not. No, my family is Romanian, and I think in Romania they have those sort of Etienne, son of Leon, kind of naming conventions. And so when they came over to New York, they picked a name out of a book, I guess.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you've just wiped out 7 follow-up questions I had for you.
What are we here to talk about?
Great. So, Eric, we're in sunny San Diego. I met
Yes.
you a couple years back, and we've become friends, and a friendship I really value. I would like to sort of start off with asking you a little bit about your technical background, and mostly how you ended up becoming the CTO of Rock My World Media. And so just give us a little bit of an overview on Eric the Romanian.
I've just been a computer geek since I was a little kid. Tore apart my dad's computer and upgraded it so I could play video games. Turned into a little hacker when I was a teenager and causing mischief, and just got really into even the emergence of the internet. I worked at an ISP when I was 15, and that turned into college and internships. So this is just me. Software.
So not an ISP where you had to make sure that the telephone lines were still connected.
It was mostly people calling in to complain, why their modems weren't working, or their, or any other thing, their dog chewed through their power cables or what have you. But
it's amazing to me. I feel like people, if I reflect on my own growth into this field, I feel like there was a certain magic when you saw what the internet did, appreciating the connectivity, and then just getting sort of enchanted by that, and then just getting sort of sucked into that world. I feel like that's a certain type of person that responds in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to date myself here. I remember logging onto my first bulletin board system back in the early 90s before the internet, and I joined this chat room, and there's people talking, and I did not believe that they were actual people. I thought it was this really complex just computer program that was emulated, and I was trying to trick it. I was basically giving it a Turing test without knowing. I was probably 11 years old at the time, but from that point on I was just amazed and hooked, and yeah, I've been involved ever since. So
yeah, for me it was also it was late 80s, early 90s, when as a South African we were so isolated from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And some student introduced me to IRC, and I couldn't believe that I now had a way to actually communicate with Americans.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I can
that's
type
amazing.
a question and they can respond.
Right. And there's still people having that experience today for the first time, right? It's
And it's
amazing.
funny how just to fast forward with Rock My World Media, where you were building chatbots.
Yeah.
The poetic irony there.
It's really hard to convince people of, of a meaningful human experience.
So
yeah.
where were you? Where was this? In which
I
part of
grew
the
up
world?
in Florida.
Okay.
I grew up in Florida. And I was just, I started coding early, and right out of college, I was developing software. But then I started kind of jumping back and forth between sort of leadership or the business side of things and technology. I think when I graduated, it was when globalization was really taking off. And so jobs were getting outsourced. It wasn't as secure of a job as it once was. And so I looked for a way to differentiate myself. And so I got into, project management and product management, systems architecture, and kind of just moved up to higher level and actually stepped away from coding somewhat and moved to more of a systems engineer kind of role.
That's a fascinating insight, really, because I think at that age, I'm assuming mid-20s.
Yeah.
I think as a geek, you tend to want to go deeper into the code, which ultimately, you had the sort of foresight that will be the commodity to some degree. And then to differentiate yourself on sort of the higher level thinking and the problem solving stuff, which I think to some people only comes much later in their career.
Yeah, actually, if I had to think back, so I actually had this opportunity to get my PhD in computer science. I was doing research at this supercomputing lab at University of Florida, and he wanted me on as a PhD student. And I knew the other PhD students there, and they were miserable. They were there for 7 to 10 years, and I just didn't really like that path. And so I went and got my MBA instead. Pretty much just a year or two out of college, I started doing my MBA in entrepreneurship because, again, this was post .com burst 1.0. Silicon Valley was taking off again. And I was sort of enamored by, the startup culture, I'm just a futurist, right? And so I just want to be on the cutting edge of technology. I mean, at this point, even Google is coming up. I mean, Apple hadn't even, become that important yet. I mean, Microsoft still ruled. And so, I wanted to be at that forefront of technology, and this was the path that it took me down.
So you ended up, just kind of fast forwarding, you ended up at Qualcomm.
Yeah, I was there for almost a decade.
And then decided that you wanted to go into hardcore startup from a behemoth into the little rowboat.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And you became the CTO of Rock My World Media. Maybe tell us in a few words sort of what that company was about or still is about, and what your role as CTO sort of pertained.
Yeah, it's a digital health and fitness company. When I started, it was primarily a music company. We developed an app called Rock My Run that was a music app for running and group fitness and exercise. But as the company grew, we sort of expanded that model into essentially, just creating technology products for the health and fitness market. I was a musician growing up. I was a DJ. In fact, my CEO and he was a DJ as well. That's kind of how we became friends. We also got our MBAs together, so we were friends for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun building this product. And then we had some success.
Were you involved in the building of the music app? Okay, were you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was actually kind of an advisor, just sort of a friend to my CEO in the very early stages. I helped them kind of determine what their tech stack was going to be early on. And so I was always just kind of along for the journey. And then at some point I came on as kind of a consultant, and then that turned into a full-time role.
Now, the interesting thing about that technology was the speeding up and slowing down of music within reason,
Right.
depending on the pace at which you're running.
Right. So we had some technology to match the cadence of the music to your steps, and then also to your heart rate as well.
Now, this is pre-Apple Watch.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you guys do it?
Accelerometer, mostly.
In the telephone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have an accelerometer that basically just gives you a vector of how the phone is moving,
Direction and speed.
and if you imagine if you graph that out, there's kind of a it's a wave of some sort as you're rising and falling, and we figured out how to essentially transform that wave into steps.
Fascinating. How does one transform the wave into steps?
It's math.
I guess the high is a 1 and the low is a 0, and then
it's a cycle, right?
Yeah.
And that cycle of up and down and back to 0 is a step. And so you just simply sort of measure the time between those rises and falls.
What is the most popular beats per minute?
I think about 140 to 160.
Okay.
Yeah, so like fast hip hop or house music is pretty much right in there.
And you wouldn't speed up something that, for instance, the song is 110 up to 160.
Right. Yeah, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work great in all situations. So.
Yeah, that is fair. I mean, how often as a runner I wanted to, when I used to run. Eric, why are you laughing, bro? As a runner. Wow. I've resorted to putting songs in playlists where I would just learn which songs I enjoyed running to.
Right.
Instinctively, sort of by the beats per minute, I suppose. And then you just kind of have them in a static playlist.
Right.
But your sort of revolutionary or innovative approach was, let's pick from a library of songs that you guys licensed specifically for this use, and then you could speed it up and slow it down.
Yeah, that technology is sort of one aspect of it. I think the real secret sauce is the content. It's the music itself. So we had professional DJs, celebrity DJs that are making music with running in mind, right? So the transitions, the energy level of the song. I mean, it all just has that activity in mind. And so, you might make your playlist, but you might have a song that's 6 minutes long, and there's a 2-minute intro, and then there's a part where the music stops, and all that kind of thing. It just doesn't fit. We might take the 60 seconds that's the most energetic part of the song, and then blend those two together, right? Professional mixing. So there's the curation, there's the professional mixing, and then there's obviously the tempo matching on top of it. So
yeah, because when I think about Rock My Run, the app, I've always was amazed by the speeding up and slowing down, but really, like you said, it was a lot more than that. What about if I needed a song that was just slightly faster than what I was comfortable with, so that I could increase my strength?
Yeah, no, you can manually change the tempo as well. And in fact, where we ended up going with it was trying to do some analytics to predict and prescribe music for you as well, right? So we look at what you've listened to in the past. So say, for example, a certain song comes on, it's your favorite song, say it's Eye of the Tiger, right? That song comes on, and all of a sudden,
that song is huge in South Africa right now.
Really? A little bit behind the curve.
I think they're touring. They're touring.
Are you kidding?
No.
I never know with you. So this song comes on, and you get that burst of energy, and you bust out into a sprint, right? We know how fast you're running, and we can actually detect that you ran faster when that song played than other songs. And so that becomes what we call like a power song for you. And then there's all these attributes of that song that we can say, well, find me other songs like this one. And there's even APIs out there that you can say, find me other songs that match this one. And so we can actually then recommend other content it's not what you like, it's what your body actually performs better to.
Yes. Okay. So just not to belabor this too much, but tell me about the streaming music. Was there a streaming service dilemma in terms of whether it was an Android app and the Google Play Store, or whether it was an iOS app and Apple Music or Spotify, or did you have any of those issues, or were the playlists streamed from your service, or how did you manage that?
Yeah, we had our own content library.
So the music was exclusively streamed from your library.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you would license that music and purchase it, and then I'm assuming that's a pretty expensive exercise.
It is. I mean, the world of music licensing it's messy. Yeah.
I have a couple tunes with some beats that I'm selling for $5 each.
Independent content, it's the way to go. Everyone's doing it. Netflix is doing it. Spotify's doing it.
Where is streaming music going to go, do you think?
Yeah.
I mean, the human loves consolidation.
Well, I mean, I think Netflix is really out in the forefront of this, and for this reason, right? Why does Netflix have their content library? A, because yes, exclusives are good and it gets you on their service, but B, it's because they were spending so much money on licensing content.
Fascinating.
It was too expensive. It was killing their profit margin, so they ended up
like, for
investing.
the same price, I could just build my own show.
Right. And so Spotify is doing the same thing now. So Spotify, it's an interesting kind of story that, they're a company that generates, I think, about $2 billion a year in revenue, and they've never turned a profit because 70% of their revenue goes to licensing. And it just happened, I think, a couple of weeks ago, that they're going to get sued by the publishers for about $1 billion because of licensing issues. So now they're going down the same route where they're going to become their own record label, and there are going to be albums and content that only exists on Spotify, and they don't have to pay any licensing for it.
And we're back to the beginning. I mean, it's just it's just an evil cycle, isn't it? Now Spotify turning into a record label is like the worst cliche you can think of, right? I mean, let's take innovation, take it to the alleyway, and beat the crap out of it.
Yeah.
It sucks. I hate how I have playlists that I cannot share with some people because they aren't on Apple Music. Mm-hmm. What era do we live in?
Yeah. I mean, there's one argument for consolidation, right? If everyone's on the same platform, then it makes it really simple. But then you go towards monopoly, and then you lose out in the end anyway. So
it's crazy. So as if the music streaming licensing wasn't one challenge you guys picked, you then decided to jump into AI and chatbots.
Yeah.
So just tell me, we don't have to get into what Rock My World is doing with chatbots. I know we had a great conversation about your research that you did around going further upstream and asking the question, well, why do people run? And how do we enter that game, which I know is a whole different conversation. But if I am a founder of a company, tech company, and I built my traditional app, my traditional website, web app, whatever, and I'm interested in building a chatbot, what would you say to me in terms of is it necessary? Mm-hmm. Secondly, maybe you can just, I know when you built your chatbots, the tools that you used, maybe just as a guidance for people who do want to build that. Mm-hmm. So just maybe riff a little bit on the whole chatbot. Yeah. Is it necessary as a founder to really consider that? Thinking about Facebook Messenger and all those interfaces. Mm-hmm. And then if it is, what kind of tools would you recommend to get up and running as quickly as possible?
Yeah, the only reason to develop a chatbot is if you're trying to create an experience that is made better by a chatbot. So there are certain use cases in which you have to say you have an app. So here's an example. This is kind of where we came from. If you want to count your calories, right? You use this app, MyFitnessPal. And if you want to say, I had a breakfast burrito this morning. maybe, so you go in there and, you tap a handful of buttons and you type in breakfast burrito, and
scroll down the list,
and maybe if it doesn't have it, you're like, okay, I had a tortilla and I had eggs and I had, and all this kind of stuff. It was just a really clunky interface. Then there was, then a couple people came out with these chatbots that use natural language processing where you could just say, hey, I had a breakfast burrito, and it would immediately, or you can even say, hey, I had bacon, eggs, and an English muffin. And it would break all that up and it would look it up at data and it would say, okay, done, logged, right? And so that was a particular flow that was just streamlined by that. I wouldn't go after it for its own sake, just because it's new and cool and whatever. It has to be something where, it's a meaningfully better, that a dialogue is the way of getting through it. So, it lends itself really well to customer service, for example, or even some simple forms of diagnosis, right? So there's psychology bots, there's, WebMD bots, there's all these kinds of things. It's like, well, you can't just jump right to the flow. You kind of have to have a bit of a dialogue to kind of navigate your way down a decision tree, which is ultimately what it is.
Yeah, I generally can't stand the robots on customer service calls because A, they don't understand me.
Yeah.
So I feel lonely in that sense. And secondly, sometimes you need to know what the choices are. Sometimes they'll say, well, what are you calling about? And then my logical brain's like, well, how am I going to tell the computer in the most concise way what my issue is so that I get routed to the right person the quickest way possible? And just yelling representative at the phone doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. It's not, the technology isn't quite there yet. Most of the bots you see out there are essentially tech demos. They're very limited and mostly they're on Rails. What you're talking about is really artificial intelligence. So a chatbot is not artificial intelligence.
It's an interface.
Right. A chatbot is simply an interface. Yes. It's just sending and receiving messages. Yeah. Mostly what you're doing is you're navigating a tree, a dialogue tree, a graph. Artificial intelligence is the secret sauce that actually understands how to navigate and respond and looks for nuance and things like that. And that's the part I think that is still, it's still not here yet, but that's the thing that it's going to take for this thing to hit mainstream.
Yeah, because I recently built a little chatbot in motion.ai and so the promise is all you got to do is draw the little flow diagram and then you got a chatbot. But where it misses is when you realize, oh my goodness, I need this branch for this exception, and then it's got to rejoin the tree at this, this conclusion. And it quickly becomes an absolute nightmare.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what tools did you guys use when you built, just quickly?
There's a platform called BotKit. It's an open source platform for building chatbots that was really good. We integrated with Slack. We integrated with Facebook. We used a tool called Dialogflow. It was bought by Google that does the natural language processing. And then we built a lot of stuff ourselves.
Fascinating. So that is Rock My World. You recently gave a talk at our 0111 CTO conference, Dakam. Our next one will be in September, by the way, 2018 or October.
Can't wait.
You gave one of the more popular talks, which was executing a strategic product development roadmap. I know that's your, that was then. I mean, that was 4 or 5 months ago. So I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a bit more about sort of how you've evolved around that thinking, and just tell us what you're up to now.
Yeah. Well, to come right out and say it, I left Rock My World Media about a month ago. I essentially just burned out. I was, not feeling healthy or happy. I wasn't spending, enough time with my family, and I've had a lot of time to think. And so I've been reflecting on most of my career, but then also obviously looking forward. I actually even had a chance to give a talk at the Convergence conference recently, and I was originally going to give that same talk on roadmap planning, But what I realized was that talk was actually kind of a coping mechanism or a Band-Aid to treat an underlying problem. And now I'm actually really getting down to root causes. Talking about roadmap planning, I think the issue that I was trying to address in that talk was how do you make sure that you're building the right thing, right? How do you make sure, there's a lot of talk around being agile and efficient and development and so on, but there's nothing more wasteful than building the wrong thing. And so when you've got a lot of different voices, when you have a lot of people with opinions that think that they know what is the right thing to build, how do you really understand what the right thing is? In my opinion, it's the users. That your users should be telling you, you should have a laser focus on them. You should be building really strong relationships of empathy and trust with them, and building your entire culture and your entire company to be in service to them. And so the strategic roadmap planning was kind of a process by which you could sort of cram in user feedback when you decide what features you're going to build next in your product. But ultimately, you've still got these loud voices and these communication breakdowns and so on, and then even if you have the strategic roadmap, by the time it gets to engineering, you're playing the telephone game and so on. And so there are these patterns that I've found at pretty much every company I've ever worked with, big and small. And it's going to get a little heady, but I think it all actually stems from the system of business that we have here in this country, which is essentially the profit model of capitalism, right? So whether it's a publicly traded company or a venture capital funded company, when the fundamental goal of the company is to generate profits, there are all these problems that emerge from that. Similarly, like if you're a musician, right? If you're an independent artist, right, they talk about sort of artistic integrity, and everyone complains that they go to these big labels and they crush your spirit and so on. The same thing happens with startups. The same thing happens with companies. When you have aggressive investors that are looking at the bottom line, you end up making compromises and sacrifices to your mission, which is ultimately, or which should be, if you're a strong founder and visionary, to make a meaningful impact in people's lives. So everyone just gets feverish around growth and wealth and so on. And you start talking about things like, monetizing how do we monetize our users?
What's the revenue model?
Well, let's think about that word, monetization. It means to transform people into money. It's one of these like bizarre terms like human resources, right? Like you're not a person, you're a resource. You're like lumber, and that just always just stuck in my craw. And it's something that I think ultimately ended up being the reason why I left every company I ever did. It's because I felt so disconnected from the purpose of the company. In fact, you ask, why did I jump into the rowboat of a startup? At big tech, I'm so far removed from what I'm actually doing. It's that cog in the machine mentality. So what I'm trying to do now, and what I did with my talks, and I'm going to be writing about and so on, is trying to take a different approach to building companies, culture, and products that focus on being in service to a group of people, right? You are dedicating your lives to making some people's lives better. It could be doctors or stay-at-home moms or teachers or whatever it is. You pick your group that you're committed to. And the culture is based around that, and all the products are based on making their life better, and it emerges from that. And then all of the success and the revenue and all and so forth, that all comes out of having integrity and empathy and trust with your users and so on. So that's kind of the philosophy. And then the process of it is basically diving deep into kind of the UX, the user experience discipline. So doing lots of interviews and focusing on real solid market research, but tying that even into engineering. So as a CTO, I latched onto that, early on, and a lot of the problems that I had with my engineers were, think about communication. They misinterpreted something, or they made the wrong decision because they didn't actually understand the user's problem. Or there's communication bottlenecks because they can't make a decision because they just don't know. They don't know what the users are going through or what the right answer is. So that UX discipline can teach engineers at any level, why are we here? Who are we in service to? And even giving them a direct line to those people so they can say, which one of these do you like better?
So are you saying, so the shift, is the shift the making a specific domain's lives better for as a purpose and not as a profit motive? Or is the shift pervasive, a UX that's sort of pervasive through the company so that everybody understands that domains?
Yeah.
So happy.
The discipline is user-centric design, right? I didn't invent this. It's the idea that the user, their perspective and their input is ingrained in every single step of the process, from vision all the way through to delivery and even customer service. And you create all these different feedback loops along the way so that at every step of the way, you're touching base with your users, you're getting their feedback, and you're increasing fidelity on the things that work and you're shedding the things that don't. So that what ultimately comes out is something, you're essentially collaboratively building the product with your users, right? And in that process, you end up developing a great amount of empathy for them. So just by going through this, this discipline, you understand, their environment, their culture, their relationships, the pain that they suffer, their wants and their needs, and all of these things. And as much as possible, you actually adopt them on your own. So let me give you an example. You talk about, streaming apps again. So let's say I'm building a streaming app and I'm an Apple Music user. So when I look at my navigation, when I look at my language, my terminology, and so on, I'm just naturally going to model it after Apple Music. But if all of my users are Spotify users, they're going to touch my app and they're going to it doesn't feel natural to them. It doesn't fit into their world. And so that can be everything from, again, language, custom. I mean, this is even the iOS versus Android type of design patterns. So as much as possible, you need to adopt their way of living, even down to like decorating your office, the music you listen to, all these things. As much as you can absorb their context, you'll intuitively know the right answer when you're trying to make these decisions about, should we build this or that? Should we design it this way or that? And ultimately, again, you have empathy for them. You deliver something that just speaks to them. You know what they're thinking. And then they develop trust for you. And you maintain that trust and you don't sacrifice it, regardless of what your shareholders think. You're a customer service business, so you don't outsource your customer service. Customer service is the point at which your customers they need you the most. It's your human connection to those people. I believe that every single person at the company should take a turn doing customer service. It's something I did at Rock My World, which was really eye-opening. I'm this kind of just jaded developer type, and somebody wrote in that was they were just cussing. They were just being nasty. The guy was like, don't mess with me. I'm a Marine. I'll mess you up, kind of stuff. I mean, really upset. And I was actually this persona. Our customer service persona is a cheerful mid-20s woman named Kelly. So I'm Kelly, and I have to go, hi, ! Smiley face. I'm so sorry that you're having this problem. Let's dig in. And then as CTO, I'm able to really deep into the technical aspects of it, giving him very detailed instruction. Probably the best customer service that one could ever hope for, having the CTO solving your specific technical challenges. And he responded back and just said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even know that you were real.
Wow.
I didn't even know that you were people. I was just venting. I'm so sorry, and so on. And it ended up leaving us a 5-star review. And so I did some research after this. So there's actually 2 studies that support this. One is, they researched Yelp reviews, and they found that people who go to restaurants who have a bad experience but is then resolved by the staff actually leave better reviews than if they didn't have a bad experience at all, right? You go to a restaurant and you have an okay time, 3.5, 4 stars. okay, they mess up your food, but then they come out and they're falling over
Wow.
you and they give you free stuff, whatever. Wow, that was great, you know. The other one, which is kind of weird, is someone decided to go to a proctology office, and people would, you know, get their exam, and then immediately they would put a survey in front of them. How was your experience? And I was like, well, that was terrible. You know, would you recommend this to your friends? But then they took another group and they gave them the exam, but then they turned down the lights and they played soothing classical music for 5 minutes. And then they gave them the survey. And they said that wasn't so bad, you know. But so anyway, to tie that up is that, you know, you think you're building technology, but really what you're building is you're building an organization that is in service to a group of people, and you got to maintain that integrity. And
Yeah.
I know that finances make it difficult, and it's, you know, everyone's looking for raising money. I guess to tie it up, what I'm trying to do is say, don't build a company so that you can raise venture capital, right? Build a company because you're passionate about making a real difference in people's lives, and only take that venture capital when it's absolutely necessary to achieve those goals.
And that's a great reminder, because how often have you been pitched by founders who say, we're building the MVP so that we can go raise a round.
Yep.
And I think what you're challenging is, hey, maybe that might be an outcome, but certainly that isn't the language you're using as you're building your company. When I was CTO of our company, I'll never forget my COO. We had a massive hack, which basically resulted in, you know, thousands of people having to be emailed and contacted. And he said to me, our customers don't expect us to have the fix as much as they just expect to hear from us.
Right.
And the net effect of people feeling like we took the steps to inform them, the responses were generally, oh, great, well, we realize there's a problem. No problem, I'll change my password. Or, hey, man, it's great to know you guys are on top of this. Thanks for letting me know. And I think it's that showing the respect,
Right.
of you are worthy of the time that I had to take to let you know of this issue, has a massively positive impact. And then, of course, constantly reminding ourselves that we're doing this for humans is necessary.
Yeah, the human touch.
What would you, just as we wrap up, how would you handle sort of the objection that, well, engineers, you know, they need to be focused on the coding and the, you know, they generally want to be in their dungeons with their headphones on, and we don't want to take them beyond their comfort zone and give them all this other information, you know, to fuel empathy. What would you say to people who say, well, the company's got to be broken down into its discipline so everyone can operate at their strengths and sort of shield each other from unnecessary information? I mean, how would you handle, what would you say to them? I
completely disagree with that whole statement. You know, one thing that you're talking about, the artifact of doing that is a lack of information, right? Now you have to create process to sterilize and communicate what you would have done otherwise if people were actually bought into the mission of the company. The other thing is that, you know, I personally don't want to hire any developer who just wants to be in a dungeon, who wants to code and doesn't want to be bothered. You know, I've always had a difficult time recruiting. I mean, talent's hard to come by. And what I found is that I always had better results if I hired for fit than hired for skills. As part of the interview process, I would pretty much flat out ask them, you know, do you really believe in what we're trying to do here? Are you committed? So, you know, at Rock My World, are you a music fan? Do you care about health and fitness? You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be a musician. But if those things don't matter to you, then you're not gonna be there when the going gets tough, right? You're just here for a job. You're here because you need a paycheck. But people who are bought into the mission, people who understand and care about the users, they're gonna be the ones that are gonna, you know, jump online in the weekend and fix stuff and do whatever it takes because they're intrinsically motivated. They actually care. You can't make somebody care about that kind of thing. And as long as people are sitting in their dungeon, they don't have any real purpose other than just whatever's coming in their queue.
Yeah, I think that also raises the just highlights the importance of, oftentimes, I've heard it described that the CEO's most important jobs are revenue and culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing more and more is that the CTO is responsible for culture as well.
Absolutely.
Especially in the domain of technology, but also as that is a cross-functional thing, how that gets lived up. Because how often have you been in conversations where you're having to defend your devs because they're either, inaccessible or they only work on what they want to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what this approach that you're sort of talking about really sort of combats that.
Yeah, I think it might be maybe a habit or sort of a natural inclination for engineers to be private. But what I found is that if you bring them out of that cave and really, make them believe that, you're building a product, you're building a solution. You're not just developing this little bit of code here. You're building something. You're not a cog in the machine. You're building the actual thing, right? Then they become more connected to the mission. They're more bought into the company. And they're there. They're there for the journey. They're not just there for the paycheck.
Eric Weiss, just quickly, any books that you're reading right now or that you're excited about or that you can recommend? Or
interesting. I've been on a philosophy kick lately. So I'm a big fan of Alan Watts. He's a philosopher from the 60s, kind of a Zen Buddhist, but he really helped me kind of put a lot of things in perspective. I'm going through kind of a transformational shift right now, and he helped put me in the right mindset. Now I'm working on one called Trusted Advisor. So as I move into consulting, this is again the model that I'm not here to take money from you. I'm not here on a transactional basis. I'm here for you. I'm here to make you succeed. And even if that means I don't get paid, I'm more focused on the relationship and on your success than short-term gains. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a wonderful pleasure.
Have you chatted with a CTO lately?